Hello, everyone. Hello, hello. All right. Hi. You may see that we are in a slightly different location today. I am out at my parents' house in wine country, and one of my best friends is visiting from San Francisco, and I just took the day to hang out with her. So I am broadcasting from Sherwood, and I really hope this internet connection is okay. If there are issues, let me know. And also, I am just broadcasting from Instagram today. I got on Facebook. I put a note on Facebook. If you know anyone who's maybe going to taste through Facebook, maybe send them a note and just let them know they changed their live streaming terms again. I can't keep up. And I don't know. At this point, I might just be doing it through Instagram. And I haven't heard that that's an issue for anyone. If it is, please let me know and I'll make an effort to figure Facebook out. But I haven't heard that that's a problem. It seems like everyone's been able to get on through Instagram. So give me feedback if you would really like it to be on Facebook as well. My mom is watching from the other room. Great. Hi, hello. Hope everyone is having a great Sunday and enjoying this beautiful weather. It's lovely out here in wine country. Okay. And today we are talking about Chile or Chile. And I don't have my fancy wine book, but I did find an atlas inside that I'm going to use for geographical reference. So hopefully that is satisfactory. I'm glad to hear that Instagram is working well for everybody. That's great. Awesome. Also next week, just as a little heads up, we're going to have a guest for the first time. We're going to have a guest winemaker on, and I'll talk a little bit more about the format, but it's going to be the first time doing like a split screen, and I think it'll probably be easiest to just do it on Instagram. So hopefully that'll all work out. But yeah, if you have friends that work on Facebook, tell them to just come on over to Instagram. Hi, Tashina. Welcome, everyone. Hi, Wendy. Hope everyone's having a great day. Maybe you're watching from outside. We're going to definitely talk a little bit about like history and geography, but we're going to try and keep it pretty succinct because we have 3 wines to taste today, which I know is ambitious. And if you are watching alone and maybe don't want to open all 3 bottles, you don't need to. You know, you can hear us talk about them and maybe save one for later. Or I'll kind of let you know if you do open all 3, maybe which ones to drink first and which ones will probably last a little longer. Okay, so let's start talking about Chile. Has anyone been to Chile? I'm sure everyone can kind of picture where it is. It's a very unique location. So if we are looking at South America, which I know it's backwards because we're on Instagram, Chile is basically right here. You guys all know that. It's a teeny, skinny, long country that has the longest shoreline per land area. I don't know if I'm saying that quote correctly, but basically they have a lot of shoreline for the amount of space that they have, obviously because the whole border is on the Pacific Ocean. Oh great, Noma has been to wine country there. Awesome. Yeah, and so their wine country, so if we kind of think about, you know, Central America is obviously pretty warm. But, you know, if we're thinking the tip of Patagonia is obviously right next to Antarctica. So Chile is so long that it kind of spans really hot weather to really cold weather. And wine country for them is all very central. It's right near Santiago. And I'm going to put this map down because I know it's not great. But Santiago, just so you get an idea, is sort of right in the middle of the country. And it's actually just across the Andes from Mendoza, a place we have talked about before. So if you'll remember back to a couple weeks ago, if you guys were with us when we talked about Mendoza, you remember that it is, you know, fairly close to the equator. It does get a lot of sun. But at least in Mendoza's case, it's so high altitude that you get a lot of cool weather. And Chile is a little bit different because it is stuck between, basically, it's the Andes and then there's the Pacific Ocean. So kind of 2 massive influences on the climate there. There's also a smaller coastal range of mountains right next to the Pacific Ocean. So their wine country is sort of it's these valleys that are in between the huge Andes on the east and then this kind of smaller coastal range on the west, which buffers some of the weather that comes off the Pacific Ocean. Easter Island is off the coast of Chile, absolutely. The wine growing area there is more vast than anywhere. Oh, I did not know that. Yeah, I have not been to Chile ever, and definitely have not been to their wine country. I've heard it's really beautiful, and I've heard it's a nice one to go visit because it's pretty easily accessible from Santiago. It's all within like an hour or two, which is kind of cool. And yeah, my mom is saying just like Oregon. That's a good point. We have like the Cascades on one side and we have the Coast Range on another. In the case of the Andes, it's just that they are massively tall. So let's talk just a little bit. We'll get more into like microclimates when we're talking about these couple bottles, but just a brief history on like the origin of wine in Chile. So if you'll remember, we've talked about the idea of New World versus Old World. And New World, the technical definition between the two is Old World is any region where Vinus vinifera is native. So Vinus vinifera, I know you guys have heard me use that term, is basically the varieties of grapes that are intended to be winemaking grapes. So Pinot Noir, Chardonnay, Merlot, all of the grapes that make wine are Vinus vinifera. That's just their Latin name. Other grapes like Concord grapes or, the different green grapes. I don't know all the different names of grapes. Those are a different breed that are not Vinus vinifera. So you can ferment them. Like, yes, they have sugar. You can ferment them into alcohol, but genetically they're a little different, and they're sort of viewed as lesser or not as great to ferment into wine. So Vinus vinifera is basically native to Europe, the European continent. So the European continent, any region there is technically Old World. Anywhere that Vinus vinifera has been imported or transplanted or introduced would be an Old World region. So that's everywhere else. That's the Americas, North and South. That is Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, the African continent. So basically anything that's not Europe is New World. So at some point someone brought Vinus vinifera and planted it there. So that's what happened in Chile in the 1500s when the Spanish conquistadors came. And so they really took hold in Peru and Chile and a lot of parts of South America. But in Peru and Chile specifically, sorry, I don't know if you guys can hear, that's our neighbor's geese. No one's being murdered, it's just geese. Welcome to the country. So when the conquistadors came, they, as was the case for a lot of these regions, they were establishing missions. And when you have a mission and you're holding church services for the Catholic faith, you need sacrament wine. So that's how a lot of wine has been developed in a ton of different regions, was missionaries. And, you think about the monks in Burgundy, you think they're closely tied together. So Spanish conquistadors brought a couple grapes with them. And the main grape that took hold there is called mission wine, or they call it the mission grape. It's known by other names. We're going to talk about it here. It's called Pais, which is what's in here. In the Canary Islands, they call it Listan Prieto. But you'll hear it referred to as the mission grape sometimes. So that was the biggest thing they planted. So they planted a bunch of vineyards and kind of taught locals how to make wine and started this kind of small industry. But then in the late 1600s, Spain made a decree and said, hey, we're not allowing any of our colonies to export wine to Spain. Instead, we're going to make all of the colonies import Spanish wine. So they were trying to boost the Spanish economy at sort of the detriment of their colonies. So suddenly that meant that Chile and Peru had a lot of grape vineyards that they weren't allowed to make this wine because they couldn't export it out of the country. So in Peru, that's how Pisco came about, because they had all these grapevines and they were like, well, we don't know what to do with them and we're not really allowed to make wine. So they started making Pisco. And the only reason Chile didn't do that is they just didn't follow the rules. So they were like, no, we're going to keep making our own wine. Because Spain was saying, you have to drink our wine that we're sending you. But if you think about, the 1600s, shipping cases of wine from Spain across the ocean down to South America, without temperature control, rocking on a boat on an ocean for a month or however long the journey took. By the time it got to South America, it was hot, it was shaken up, it tasted probably like vinegar. And the Chileans were like, no, we're just going to drink what we're making here. It's fine. And they got in trouble a couple times because they started exporting their wine to Peru and other South American countries. And Spain was like, you have to rip out all your vineyards. And they were like, okay, cool. And they just didn't do it. So luckily, that means that Chile has developed a pretty great wine scene. And it didn't leave the country kind of really until like the end of the 19th century. And the other big sort of historical thing that influenced the Chilean wine scene was phylloxera in France. So if you can remember way back to Rioja, we talked about how Rioja came about because Bordeaux got hit with phylloxera so bad. And if you're not familiar with phylloxera, it's basically insects that infect and kill grapevines. It's detrimental for vineyards. And so it's hit a lot of regions in the world. And Chile is actually one of the only places in the world where it's never had a phylloxera outbreak. So they're very careful about like the agricultural products that they'll allow into the country because their vines have never been infected. So anyway, I lost my train of thought. So same as Rioja, basically when Bordeaux got hit, the winemakers in Bordeaux were scrambling to find other places where they could make wine because Bordeaux was screwed. The vineyards were going to take years to recover. So one place they went was Rioja, and then another place they went was Chile. And I'm not exactly sure why. I think there must have already been sort of a French foothold in Chile. Apparently, Chile actually has a lot of French immigrants, so that's the biggest modern influence on their wine scene. And that's why most of the varietals that you'll see in Chile, aside from Pais, that mission grape, are French varietals, and especially Bordeaux varietals. So Cabernet Sauvignon, Sauvignon Blanc, Merlot, Cab Franc, because it was these Bordeaux winemakers that were coming in and just taking the grapes that they knew and planting them there. So that's just kind of a cool historical context. Climatically, people think that Chile sort of sits between California and Bordeaux in terms of climate, because yes, it's hot there. It's on the 30, their wine regions are around the 35th parallel, which is pretty warm, but you get these really cool breezes from the ocean because there's so much exposure to the ocean. And you get, good irrigation from glacier melts coming off of the Andes. So you get cooling influence, and that kind of gives it more of an old world lift to the wines. So they're really unique in that sense that they're sort of a blend of old world and new world styles. So of the three wines that we're going to taste today, basically two are from a region called the Maule Valley, which is one of the oldest regions in Chile. And then the other one is sort of this up and coming region called Casablanca. So like I mentioned, pretty much all of the wine regions are in that central area near Santiago, but it's still, hundreds and hundreds of miles long. So Casablanca is very close to the ocean. Whereas the Maule Valley is kind of over the coastal range and in this warmer valley. Casablanca is wet. It gets a lot of moisture. It's rainy. I think it has, I'm picturing something, you'll have to tell me, Noma and Gail. But from my understanding, it has sort of the similar aspects of Galicia or northern Portugal, where it's coastal, maritime, sunny, but gets a lot of moisture in the air. And what they're really famous for there is Sauvignon Blanc. What's really taken off is Sauvignon Blanc and Chardonnay. Oh, cool. Today, joint ventures from most major winery brands are in the world there. Local law requires 50-50 ownership by Chileans. Oh, cool. Good to know. Yeah, I do know. Oh, we have a little visitor here. I need to broadcast from the country more often. If you guys remember Thelonious Wines way back in the day when we opened, this is Thea, who used to live at Thelonious. Just taking it full circle. Okay. Yeah. So that's an interesting thing to know, because so many French winemakers have bought land in Chile. And one of the reasons for that is that it's on the flipped schedule. So European winemakers, and same with Oregon, anyone in the Northern Hemisphere, are all harvesting in like September and October. But if you go in the Southern Hemisphere, they're harvesting in March or April. So winemakers have realized they can sort of like double their everything and send teams down there, and they can themselves oversee both harvests. So you see a lot of French winemakers. There is a Alsatian winemaker called Ostertag, makes some of my favorite Alsatian wines. And they have a winery in Chile that's worth looking into. It's called Monsecano. But you get some really fun wines, especially in the last 20 years, because these amazing winemakers have just been like, oh, in the off season, I'm going to go hang out down there. So back to Casablanca. Sorry, guys. Sauvignon Blanc, Chardonnay, and Pinot Noir, which sounds kind of similar to what we do here. It's really great for Pinot Noir and Chardonnay because it's cold and it's, kind of rainy. Gets some nice acidity in the grapes. So I would have honestly liked to give you guys a Sauvignon Blanc. And this producer, Prisma, thought it was appropriate for this month too, right? They make a great Sauvignon Blanc. They're just unfortunately sold out of it right now. And so this is their rosé from Pinot Noir. It's very similar. It reminds me of like a Sancerre rosé, which, we'll taste it right now. You guys can tell me what you're tasting. But it's definitely cold climate Pinot Noir, and their Sauvignon Blanc is definitely worth a try as well. So let's crack this open because we have 3 wines to go. Yeah, isn't this a pretty label? There's a lot of biodynamic and organic and natural viticulture and winemaking practices in Chile. And this guy, I can't remember exactly his story on this, but he was saying that he just wants his winemaking to act as like a prism to like see the natural character of the grape through and like unlock all the different aspects that are naturally there, kind of like looking through a prism, which I thought was pretty cool. And he's also biodynamic, natural. All of these wines are fermented with native yeast. I think they have like a little bit of sulfur with bottling, but just so that, they taste good once they get to us. But let's pour it in the glass and taste it. Yeah, I thought it was perfect for this month, this label. Okay, so if you can see, it's got this lovely pale pink color. It looks like, that kind of classic Provence style that we talked about a couple weeks ago. Very light. I don't know, tell me what you guys are noticing on the legs, on the color. I would say it has maybe just a tiny little hint of like a salmon, but it's very like rose petal, like baby pink. Waiting for some legs to form here. I don't actually know what the alcohol on this is. 12.5. So that would make sense. They're like barely forming on here and they're going fairly quick. Tell me what you guys are smelling on this. I think this wine has some really pretty aromatics. Very approachable, easy to drink. I would agree with that. I could drink a lot of this wine this summer. So, yeah, peach colored, absolutely. Long legs. Yeah, probably they're moving fairly quickly because the alcohol is fairly low on this. And the color, I think this was pressed within 12 hours of being on the skin, so just gets just a hint of color. What are you guys smelling on the nose? Andy says we're smelling not quite ripe strawberry. That is spot on. Oh, perfect. And someone's drinking a Johann Pinot Noir Rosé. Yeah, same grape, honestly kind of similar climate. So totally valid swap. Well done. Smelling some lemon, watermelon candy. Absolutely. I was going to say, I get a lot of watermelon in this. I also get just a hint of like tropical fruit. Are you guys smelling that? Like a little bit of pineapple maybe. Yeah, someone said summery fruit. Yeah, not quite ripe strawberries. Yeah, often with cooler climates, and especially with rosé, that they're aiming to make rosé direct press rather than Saunier, which we talked about the difference between the two. They're picking pretty early, so they're trying to like retain as much acidity in the wine as possible for freshness. And so it makes sense that you're getting the smell of like underripe fruit. Abby, I'll try and find you some in Austin. I'm waiting to hear back from the distributor down there. I'll tell you where you can find some because this is worth picking up. It's lovely. Cantaloupe, that's a great note. Yeah, maybe even a little bit of like, teeny bit of like lychee or something in there. All right, let's taste it. Woo, it's very refreshing, I think. What do you guys think about the acidity on here? And what do you guys think about, I haven't really asked this question a lot, but if you had to guess, like about the production method, do you think they aged this in oak, stainless steel, cement? Any guesses? Did it sit on the lees? Like anything that you're picking up? Someone said maybe a little kiwi on the nose. Yeah, I like that. I could totally smell that. Citrus, yeah, we didn't talk a lot about citrus, but grapefruit, I feel like I'm smelling a lot. I think the acidity, yeah, someone said lots of acidity, but so drinkable. Absolutely. Yeah, higher acidity, tastes a little tart. Yeah, and I mean, again, it's personal preference. I love a rosé in this style because it's so refreshing, and I feel like people are thinking about drinking it like in the heat, and it's meant to kind of like, almost drinking like a cold soda or something, just like really refresh you. And so there's definitely a good amount of acid in here. What about tannin? I mean, I think you guys know by now, tannin comes from skin contact. Obviously, this was only on the skins for a very short period of time, so you shouldn't pick up much tannin in here. And Gail said stainless steel. Yeah, this one is actually in, I want to make sure I get this right. I want to say he makes this in cement. I think that's true. I could be wrong, but as I'm saying it, I'm like, maybe that's not right, but I'm pretty sure that he makes it in cement. If not, it's definitely stainless steel, but it's not oak. I'm pretty sure it's cement. I'll get back to you on this. Prefer tart over sweet in a rosé. Yeah, me too. But again, that's personal preference. Some people might like a really fruit-forward rosé. My favorite of the rosés we've tried thus far. Yeah, it's one of my favorites too. It's so great. Yeah, stainless steel or cement. You guys are getting so good. Absolutely. And I mean, I can ask you what you think what you'd like to pair with this. I would like to pair like a pool and a swimsuit with this. I think that would be perfect. But you could, enjoy this, bring this to any party, enjoy it with some barbecue, with some summer salads. Oh, I'm glad you guys are liking it so much. Yeah, what this reminds me a lot of, if you guys like this and want to try something kind of similar, look up Sancerre Rosé, because the region of Sancerre in the Loire Valley, the grapes that they grow there are Sauvignon Blanc and Pinot Noir, much like Casablanca. And so if you see Sancerre Rosé, it's going to be made from Pinot Noir. If you see a white Sancerre, it's going to be made from Sauvignon Blanc. If you see a red Sancerre, it's going to be made from Pinot Noir. So it's just those two varietals. But it reminds me a lot of this. And it's funny, like this is Pinot Noir, but it tastes a little bit and smells a little bit like Sauvignon Blanc. And I've never gotten a good explanation for why that is. Coming from a region where they also grow Sauvignon Blanc, like Pinot Noir Rosé, when it's picked really early and made in this style of rosé, always reminds me a little bit of Sauvignon Blanc. So if you like this, Sancerre Rosé will run you a little bit more, but if you want like a great summer bottle, it's probably going to be in like the, $20 range, maybe $25, but they are delicious too. Or just any like really pale, like colder climate rosé of Pinot Noir. Yeah, you guys are loving this. That's great. Maybe pair with upside down pineapple cake. I love it. That sounds like an ideal summer afternoon. Sounds like someone needs to have a garden party once we're officially in phase 1 in Multnomah County, if it ever happens. Well, cool. I'm glad you guys are liking this. I'm realizing I have to pour this out because I only brought one glass. Parents are going to be yelling at me, but I'm going to pour it in this plant. Okay. All right. So let's move on to this wine here. And you know, these wines are all really different styles, but this Pais, someone said key lime pie. Absolutely. This is sort of quintessential Chilean wine. So Pipeño is a style of wine. It's basically the style of wine that Chile made for hundreds of years. So I mentioned how the Spanish conquistadors and missionaries brought the mission grape, which they called it, or it translated, they would call it just the common black grape, you know, because anyway. So the name of the grape itself is Pais, or at least that's what they call it, and that's Pais, which is confusing because it literally just translates to country in Spanish. And all this to take away that it's just sort of like their everyday grape. And what they would do, because if you remember, Chile suddenly couldn't export their wine. So the wine that they were making was just for them to drink. Like there wasn't a lot of money in it. They were just drinking it for themselves. They weren't exporting it out of the country. They weren't selling it. They were just enjoying it. And they had these, so as you can imagine, they probably weren't importing like French oak barrels and fancy oak barrels. And there's a certain type of redwood tree that is native to Chile. I can't remember the name of the tree itself, but they would make these barrels out of this redwood, and they called the barrels pipas. So everyone would just have a pipa in their backyard, and they would grow some of this Pais grape. They would make this wine. It wasn't complex. It wasn't trying to be fancy. It was just very like drinkable, juicy, fun, simple, like table wine. And so they started calling it Pipeño because of the pipas barrels. And everyone would have Pipeño in their yard, and sometimes people would like cart their Pipeño around, and people would like come and fill up their bottle from the pipa barrel. So it's sort of making a comeback. When the French came in and brought all the fancy French varietals and suddenly started making, you know, fancy wine to send out into the world and like, you know, impress people with, the Pipeño style sort of fell away because it was thought of as like peasant wine. But in the last 20 years, it's sort of making a comeback, and people have embraced it because it's an homage to their history and their culture. And it's meant to be like young, juicy, fresh, not overly complicated, you know, affordable, just enjoyable wine. And everyone makes it slightly differently. This is actually, so the producer is called Viña Maitia, and the producer is a French winemaker who moved to Chile in his 20s. He was working in Bordeaux, and he wanted to go somewhere, I think, where he could like afford land and like make a name for himself. And so he went to Chile and he started making, you know, Bordeaux varietals and this kind of more posh wine. And he fell in love with the local Pipeño style. And so, like some of the other French winemakers, he started making one himself. And so this one is 80%. Someone's saying it needs to open up a little bit. Yeah, that might be the case. This wine is also, it might not be everyone's cup of tea. It's a little bit natural in style. It's not funky, I don't think, but it has a little bit of that like natural aroma to it. And yeah, it might just need to blow off a little bit. And if you can see, it is very light. It's sort of between a rosé and a red. You can sort of see through it. I'm trying to see if you can see this color well. This sat on the skins for 5 days, so not a very long time. And you could drink this at, you know, cellar temperature. You can even see through the bottle, or you could put a slight chill on it. I like it both ways. I feel like if it's cold, you can't really smell it or taste it as well. So I like just a little bit of a chill. And someone's saying, sounds like Pipeño is similar to Gamay, peasant wine making a comeback. That is an amazing comparison. And that's actually how a lot of wine people have described it too. And some of the first people to like embrace it in France were some of the natural winemakers in Beaujolais. Marcel Lapierre, now I can't think of anyone else, but there were some of these kind of nouveau natural Beaujolais winemakers who make Gamay, who kind of glommed onto this style of Pipeño. Since it's crazy, my phone asked me if it wanted to update, and I said no. Thanks for the pro tip. Perfect. So you can see very light red. Let's take a look at it. What do you guys think about the color? I like the sun in this angle. For me, there's like a little bit of purple hue to it. Sadness Gamay from Oregon. I really love that wine. He does a great job. Like like a shorter, but not quite a shorter. Yeah, I would say this has ruby with like a little bit of purplish to it. There's definitely not any like orange or of that like rust color, which if you are taking notes, you'll probably know that if a wine is like red and like with purpley notes as opposed to like brownish orangish notes, that can mean what? Probably it's a sign of age. When a wine is really young and fresh, it has that really concentrated like berry, like purpley red color, and then as it ages, it kind of like the color molecules fade and it becomes more that like rust color. Oh great, you opened 2 different Cab Sauvs from Chile. Perfect. We're gonna talk about Cab next. Yeah, beautiful sort of magenta red cranberry color. Spice. Oh, we're jumping to the nose. Perfect. Yep. And just a quick note on the legs. My legs are moving pretty. Oh, you can almost see them. They're going pretty quick. I don't know if yours are the same. Like fairly fast. I think this is like also like 12.5%. Oh, 13%. Yeah. Still fairly low alcohol. Oh, Thea has come back. Appearance number 2. Smells like ripe, but not overripe fruit. Yeah, let me stick my nose in here. Yeah, and they're definitely, I get red fruit. I get a lot of pomegranate on this. Like, this kind of looks and smells like palm to me. And then there is that little bit of like natural funk, which is just telling you that like nothing is in the wine. You know, they do just a little bit of sulfur, but other than that, it's like this is just grapes. And so that little funk just kind of tells you that they haven't corrected anything. Any other smelling notes you guys are getting? We saw cranberry, spice, fig. Yeah, I really like that. Hello, Chris Mallory. Chris is at the restaurant holding down the fort. Me and Thea are here tasting wine. What else? We'll see when we taste it, but I always get a kind of like herbal spice note to this wine as well. Cherry, like there's this like bright red fruit quality, and then this kind of like bitter herbal thing too. Okay. Cherry, absolutely. Creamy, yep. I wonder if you're tasting that or if you're smelling that, Michael. Okay, let's taste it, see what we think. I think this wine is really unique. Like for me, it ends up tasting less fruity than it smells. And it's unusual. Like, well, tell me what you guys are tasting. Dried fruit, maybe apricot. Yeah, that's a really good tasting note. I wouldn't have thought of that, but I can definitely see that. Like someone said fig earlier, yeah, like dried fig, dried apricot, crab apple. Yeah, that little bit of kind of like sour sweetness. Michael said creamy. I get a little bit of the creaminess like on the palate. What do you guys think about the aging vessel for this, or how was it fermented? How was it aged? And it's going to be sort of a trick question because, well, I want to see what you guys guess. This wine, in terms of tasting note, it always reminds me of like Campari a little bit. Do you guys get that at all? Have you had Campari? And maybe even a little bit like Aperol too. Aperol's a little sweeter, but Campari is that kind of bittersweet aperitif that's like almost this color, a little pinker. But you get those kind of like rhubarb, cherry notes on the sweet side, and then you get these kind of like bitter herbal notes on the back. Kind of reminds me of Campari. Earthy, chalky. Yeah, someone's saying it's like a jelly donut, very jammy. There's a lot of fruit in here for sure. A little sharp and spicy. Yeah, there's a spice element. Agreed. Less fruity, a little like cough medicine. Yeah, it has that kind of like sharp cherry sweetness to it. No one disagrees with me. Okay, we can agree to disagree. That's fine. Not like Campari. Not aged in wood. Yes, Wendy, you are spot on. It is aged in cement. So it spent 5 days on the skins in a stainless steel fermenter, and then they pressed it into cement where it sat for just like 6 months, because then they release it immediately. 2 types of cement and oak. Is that what it says on here? Because they used to just do cement. I don't know if Michael's guessing or if he's just showing me up. Either is fine. They used to just make this in cement. If you saw somewhere that they're adding a little bit of oak to it, that could be the case. but I think they don't want any like oak influence or flavors on the wine. At least that's my understanding. I'm glad that you guys are bouncing kind of tasting notes off of each other. Oh, okay, total guess. It's a good guess. I could, if you told me this was aged in neutral oak, I would believe it. If it was a pretty used barrel that just wasn't imparting a lot of flavor on the wine, because you're really just tasting like the fruit. I mean, we haven't talked as much about oak, but one of the ways, how do you guys generally think about detecting oak? Like, what are tasting notes that you look for when you're like, oh, there's definitely oak on this wine? Any guesses? Drying out my mouth a little bit. Can't tell if that's tannins or acidity or both. It's probably both. And like we've talked about in the past, they sort of accentuate one another. The tannins on this are fairly light because it was only on the skins for 5 days, but they're definitely prevalent. And I think there's a good amount of acidity too. And so they both, when they're both present, it sort of makes it hard to differentiate between the two. I'm getting a little bit of dryness, but it's not like I can't, like I could drink this on its own and be fine without food. Vanilla, butter, tannins, leather. Yeah, so we're talking about ways to detect oak. Yeah, vanilla is a great one. Vanilla is sort of specifically one of the tasting trademarks of American oak. Sometimes you'll get vanilla off of French oak, but French oak is intended to be a little more subtle. And so usually with oak, you'll get kind of these baking spices. You'll get like cinnamon, nutmeg, clove, and you will get this like rounder mouth feel, which people are saying buttery. Yeah, I mean, with a toasty barrel, meaning they toast the wood a fair amount, you do get this kind of like buttery sensation. And the butter or creamy quality also comes from the lees contact, from the yeast cells. So it's sort of a balance of both of those when it comes to like butter. But oak definitely always gives it some spice. And oak does enhance the tannins as well, because oak has tannins just like the skins of grapes have tannins. So when you have a wine that is just out of a new oak barrel, it's very dry, it's very tannic. It's usually, has a lot of richness to it, has a lot of spice to it. And that's why I always like to drink wines that have had a fair amount of new oak after like 5 years, because the oak kind of integrates. When you first pull it out, you can definitely taste the oak. Maybe we'll taste a wine like that one day so you guys can get an idea what I'm talking about. And Christiana, if oak equals nutty. It shouldn't. Nuttiness generally should come from oxidation, and oftentimes it's not a characteristic that we're looking for in a wine. I mean, sometimes you'll get like an underripe, like almond or walnut, kind of like a green nut note. But nuttiness generally comes from when a wine has been exposed to oxygen, sometimes accidentally, and sometimes it is intentionally. Like if you're drinking white wine from Jura, or if you're drinking sherry. That's a famous example of it. Sorry, this was kind of a detour. Like a big piece of fruit jerky, fruit roll-up. Yeah, totally. I can definitely see that. That kind of like bright fruit, but it's a little bit dried. Drink it so I don't have to pour it in the plant. Okay, so let's taste wine number 3. So we started with really light rosé, then we went a little bit fuller. And I guess real quickly, what did you guys think about this wine? I know it's not everyone's cup of tea. I just felt that I should show it to you guys because it's so like indicative of Chilean wine history. The rosé and the cab we're about to try are more the modern Chilean wine, kind of from the influence of the French, whereas this is like their country wine. So I think it's kind of a fun contrast to look at the 2 different styles, or 3 different styles. Liked it a lot. Great. I'm happy to hear that. It's not the most complex wine in the world, but all of these, they're great value, and I feel like with some charcuterie in the summer, like a picnic wine, good red wine for the heat. It's not too heavy, very drinkable. Totally. It's different, but very good. Noma asked what the price of each is. The rosé and the Pais are like in the $12, like $10 to $12 range. And then the cab is more in the $15 range. So, I mean, all really well priced. That's the only reason I could afford to do 3 wines. I was like, might as well if we can afford to do it. So that just shows you, like, you get great value sometimes in these, Southern Hemisphere regions, or kind of undervalued, under highlighted regions in the world. Pretty good. I chilled mine for 15 minutes. Absolutely. Especially if it's 90 degrees in Texas. That's exactly what I would do. Great. I'm glad you guys are liking it. Okay, let's jump to the cab. Just trying to time this perfectly because I was stressed out about 3 wines. Okay, so time for cab. Oh, and I have a chunk of cork in there. Oh, well. So let's look at the color of this. Should definitely look a little bit fuller bodied. The rosé is on special at Green Zebra right now. Ah, good to know. That is great to hear. Whenever the Sauvignon Blanc comes back, that is definitely one to look for. You know, I mean, you can't miss it with that label. It's the same label. It's just a white wine, and it's Sauvignon Blanc, and it's lovely. Cool. Okay, so what do you guys think about the color here? Any thoughts on garnet, purple, ruby, anything like that? Sorry, I'm trying to get this chunk of cork out of my glass. There we go. Very official sommelier work. I definitely see ruby with like some dark, like purpley notes. Anyone else agree? Michael's saying blood. Yeah, I mean, I see blood for sure from the concentration, kind of that deep, deep color. Sometimes I feel like blood has more of that like orangey hue to it, like when it dries. But like fresh blood, I see. This could be fresh blood. Dark cherry. Yeah, absolutely. Kind of like that. It almost looks like if you smush a blackberry or get blackberry juice on something, kind of reminds me of that color. Dark purple, ruby. And like we just said on the Pais, if we're seeing that like purple hue, that is a sign that the wine is pretty young. So even though all 3 of these wines are 2019, and one thing to keep in mind when you're looking at vintages on Southern Hemisphere wines is that they do harvest 6 months earlier. So it's not as young as it sometimes seems because they had an extra 6 months on the Northern Hemisphere compared to harvest. So kind of, you could age this, but it's also a cab that's made in the style, especially for, $15, that you could enjoy it now. They're releasing it. They want you to drink it. It's kind of like fresh and juicy and like a lot of jam-packed fruit in there. So let's look at the legs on this. I don't know what the alcohol is on this. Let's guess before we look. The legs for me are a little slower moving on here. Anyone else agree? Smells like tight blueberries. That is great. That's an excellent tasting note. We're tasting a 2010 cab. Great. Awesome. Yeah, I've had a couple Chilean cabs. So these wines all come from an importer called Brazos, which means hug or hugs in Spanish, Brazos. They have a fantastic website, which I use as a resource a lot to learn about the producers, the wines themselves. Everything they import is fantastic. So if you're interested in trying like other great wines from Chile or Argentina, which is the only place they import from, I would check out their website. And it's just a great, collection of like, these are all good producers to try. A little smoky smell like a campfire. Cool. Okay, so Christiana's guessing 14.5. Yeah, I'm going to guess maybe 14%, maybe like 13.5, but I could be wrong. I haven't actually tried it. 13%. There we go. Which just shows you that, even though it's kind of on the same latitudinal line as Mendoza, which is, just over the Andes, it is a lot cooler there just because of that ocean breeze that's constantly blowing through there. So the alcohol just can't get as, the sugars can't get as ripe, and the alcohol therefore is just not getting as high. But yeah, the legs definitely are slower moving than some of these other wines. Okay. Yeah, I see what someone is saying about that little bit of smokiness. And this wine honestly probably could open up a little bit too. I think it's also a little tight on the nose. Someone's saying ocean smell. And when you say that, do you mean like kind of like saltiness or iodine or kind of like ocean breeze? I could see that. Yeah. Yeah, there's a little bit of that natural funk on this one too. And I think it'd be interesting to see, if you drink a glass now and then wait an hour or two and then try it again, I bet we'd get a little more fruit. I think it's a little bit closed up right now. Smells different than it tastes. Okay, let me taste it and see. I would completely agree with you. Yeah, I think the fruit isn't coming through as much as I would like it to on the nose, but I definitely get it on the palate. Do you guys agree? Like what are you getting for tasting notes? I feel like I'm getting hit with a lot of fruit and a lot of flavor. And talk to me about acid, tannin, what kind of fruit are you tasting? Yeah, ocean breeze with saltiness on the nose. Yeah, absolutely. I love getting that note on wines, especially white wines. Like there's something great about a white wine that has that little bit of like saltiness to it, like Muscadet or Albarino. And sometimes you'll get it on like Sauvignon Blancs from Casablanca. The Malay Valley, I should have said, Malay Valley is slightly further, more inland. So whereas Casablanca is right on the coast, these last two wines that we tried are from the Malay Valley, which is in between the two mountain ranges. So it's a little more landlocked, gets a little less moisture, stays a little bit warmer, and therefore they're planting more full-bodied varietals. Black cherry, mole. Ooh, I like mole as a tasting note. Yeah, with that little bit of like cocoa and kind of savoriness. You had cork in yours too? Maybe it's just a very natural cork that likes to shed. Yeah, this is definitely a real cork. Now we have another guest. Sorry. Just a dog running around. Would a little aging help tame acidity? I mean, acidity won't like reduce with time in bottle, but what will happen is the wine will just find a little more balance. So the acidity and the tannin and the fruit will meld a little bit more so that the elements don't seem as disjointed. Because I agree with you, this does kind of like pop with fruit and with acid. And I think it would feel a little more symbiotic with time. But I also think that give it away. This trick question is also aged in concrete. All three of these wines were made in concrete. And I thought that would be an interesting comparison to see wines with so many different styles that were actually all made in the same vessel. So you wouldn't get like oak integration from time in bottle with this, but you would get, just integration overall. The fruit, the acid, the tannin would all kind of just meld a little bit more. I'm interested to see what do you guys think about this compared to maybe a French Cabernet Sauvignon or like a Washington or California Cabernet Sauvignon. If you drink a lot of those, I would love your opinion. Yeah, I definitely get a good amount of tannin, pretty decent acidity, ripe fruit, but do you guys get that that green bell pepper or almost like a fresh jalapeno kind of taste at all? If you're tasting any sign of green pepper, often that's something that you will detect in Cabernet Sauvignon or in Sauvignon Blanc or in Cabernet Franc. So this is just a quick tangent, I promise, but Cabernet Franc and Sauvignon Blanc are the genetic parents of Cabernet Sauvignon. They bred those two varietals together to get Cabernet Sauvignon. And all of the varietals in that family have this pyrazine quality. So pyrazine is, I don't know the scientific term, but it's like an element in fruits and vegetables that is that kind of like green herbaceous peppery taste that you get in green bell peppers or jalapenos or some green herbs. So often that gets highlighted in Sauvignon Blanc and Cab Sauv and Cab Franc when the wines are grown in slightly cooler climates. When Cabernet or Sauv Blanc are grown in really hot climates, often you get riper fruit and you don't taste the pyrazines as much. So when you can pick up on that little like peppery taste in here, often that's a clue that it's a slightly cooler climate wine version of that varietal. Nomir says the wine tastes very young. Absolutely. This producer is going for like punchy, big fruit at this price point. I think they make a couple other cabs that are meant to be aged, but this is sort of like a young, for someone who wants a big, full-bodied, dry red, but wants to, be able to spend less money and kind of just drink it right away. Not too much tannins with ours. Tastes like California cabs. Washington cabs have more fruit. Yeah, and it's good, but it doesn't have the depth of some other cabs. Absolutely. And again, 3 wines for $35. Unfortunately, I can't get you the most complex wines at that price point. And so I'm not offended by that in any way. And I agree with you. I thought it would just be a fun opportunity to try 3 really different styles, but absolutely. These are all kind of like fun, simple, juicy, approachable wines that maybe aren't the most complex or layered, but still different in style. More dry, less fruity. Love them all. Great. And yeah, someone was saying that Wendy said Washington has a little more fruit. So I would agree with you on that. I think this is interesting because it really does straddle the line between California or Washington and like Bordeaux or French Cab. I think it's closer in style to Washington and California, but I think it's not quite as fruit forward and not quite as rich. And the fact that we can taste that pepperiness tells me that it's a little bit cooler. When you taste like Bordeaux, that pyrazine, peppery thing is usually very prevalent. Truly a bargain and fun to know we don't have to spend $50. Absolutely. I mean, amazing $50 aged, lots of oak, well integrated cabs are such a treat. But if you like to drink wine and you like cab and you like a full body thing, it's great to have some options that are more affordable too. Loved these choices. Great. And yeah, I thought it'd be fun to taste 3 wines using cement. It's really unusual to try, especially Cabernet Sauvignon in cement, which just tells you kind of the style he's going for. Like, he's not trying to make a long lasting, if you want to make a cab to age, you really want to put it in oak to kind of give it more depth. But cement is like, just have the fruit shine and send it on its way. I think they're great. Enjoying something different. Great. Perfect. That is awesome. So this might be a good time to sort of quickly explain what we're going to do next week. It's going to be a little bit of a test. And unfortunately, I realize that those of you who are out of town are not going to be able to taste exactly what we're tasting. What we're going to do is we're partnering with one of my favorite wineries in Oregon called Flaneur. They're great out there. It's a fairly new winery. They're about 6 or 7 years old. And their winemaker, Grant Coulter, who's going to be joining us, was the winemaker at Beaufrère for 12 years. So if you are familiar with Oregon wine, Beaufrère is kind of thought to be, one of the godfathers and pioneers of the region. It was started in part by Robert Parker, the very famous wine critic, and also Mike Etzel, and it's just sort of legendary Oregon winery. So point is, Grant ran the show there for 12 years. He's young, he's super talented, he's super nice, and he's been killing it at Flaneur. And so we thought it would be fun to do one of their wines that's already in bottle alongside, so we're going to taste one of their Pinot Noirs that's already in bottle, that's going to be a full-size bottle of this, and then we're going to taste a barrel sample of Pinot Meunier. And it's going to be a half bottle, and I was sort of trying to balance it out by giving you guys 3 wines this week, because I realize I'm just giving you a bottle and a half next week, but these wines are a lot more expensive and do have a lot more depth and complexity. And it's a really cool opportunity to talk with the winemaker. And you guys can ask him questions. In fact, if you want to prep questions in advance, shoot them over to me so that we can make sure we talk about them, and we'll do a Q&A at the end. But he's going to pull barrel samples for you guys, and that'll be in your wine set ready for pickup on Tuesday. I'm going to go grab them tomorrow morning. And for those of you that are out of town, look for a bottle of Flaneur. They are, imported in most states. If you are having trouble finding it, let me know. But I know they're definitely in DC. I'm pretty sure they're in Texas. Or just look for any Oregon Pinot Noir or Pinot Meunier. We're going to be talking about the differences between those two varietals. We're going to be talking about what it means when he's tasting and blending in barrel versus how he puts together the blend for bottles. He's really fun. I think you guys are going to love him. So, and of course, give me your feedback on what you think about it. And I am behind on these notes. Okay. Love the rosé, paired awesome with aged Gouda. Ooh, yeah, absolutely. Would they ship a case? They probably would. I don't know if it would get to you by Tuesday, but I think they have a retailer in Texas. I will message you, Abby, and I'll put you in touch with Russell, who runs their distribution. Which one? So this is a great question. Which one of these would be best to hold on to for later in the week? I would drink the Pais first, personally. And then I would drink, honestly, the rosé and the cab will probably both last for a couple days. Rosé, I've had that rosé open for like 5 days, and there's so much acidity that it still tastes really fresh. I would drink the Pais first, and then the cab, even though this would probably be good for a couple days, and then no rush on the rosé. That would be my game plan. Cool. I'm glad you guys are excited. Oh yeah, and I hope someone said suggestions for out of town, so I think you heard, and we're in DC. Great. So yeah, the name of the winery is Flaneur, Flaneur. And Grant will explain where the name comes from next week. The owner of the winery, Marty, actually lives in DC. He splits time, but so that you guys definitely there definitely is a presence in DC. Flaneur. And Noma has a great note as well. One thing to mention, Chile spans the very high-end wine and everyday wine. Yeah, absolutely. Like some of these high-end French producers who have established wineries there do go for a lot of money and do have very like prestigious brands and are amazing. But you can also get this stuff. So it's great to know that a region like that exists as well. And thank you for pointing that out. And if you guys are having trouble if you want to actually try to find some Flaneur, and thank you for typing that out, Michael, shoot me a note and tell me where you are, and I will connect you with Russell or someone on their team, and he could at least tell you like, oh, we carry it here at this wine shop, because he would know that. But they're such good guys, and they are reopened out in wine country. I actually went out there like 2 weeks ago. They have this beautiful new tasting room in Carlton. It's the restored grain elevator in Carlton. We'll talk about it a little bit next week as well, but it's a really fun place to go visit. Okay, I hope you guys had fun today. I hope the connection was okay being out here. Fun little change of scene. We got some furry guest stars. And I hope you guys enjoy drinking these wines. Take a picture with what you're pairing it with and tag us. Hopefully you can go outside and enjoy them. But thank you guys all so much for being here, and I will see you next week. Oh my God, guys, I am crazy. Grant is probably watching this and thinking I am a psycho. Flaneur's not for 2 weeks. I'm so glad I just realized that. The wines are going to be ready for pickup. Good Lord. The wines are going to be ready for pickup on Tuesday, but Flaneur is not until the 4th week of June. So actually that gives you 2 more weeks to find the wine. Next week is Piedmont. Oh my God. It's on the website, but I am just crazy. Next week is actually Piedmont. So next week is going to be a Nebbiolo and a Barbera. And June 28th is going to be Flaneur. I am so sorry. I will post this again in social media. I just can't keep the calendar straight. So next week, Italy, and the following week, Flaneur. But you can start looking for Flaneur now. It's a day. Okay, I will see you guys next week for Italy. I'll put it on social media. Have a great day.